Hey, all my bow hunting brethren. It's Griff coming to you from the basement workshop again. And I have said for a number of years that I believe not all double lung hits are created equal. Today, I'm going to explain why. So in my last video, I went into a lot of detail about the effectiveness of the double lung shot, why we as bow hunters have been preaching the double lung shot for so long, and just the anatomy and the physiology of deer, and mostly the physiology of our respiratory and cardiovascular system. Now, today, I actually wanted to have what I'm going to do in this video. I wanted to have on the end of that video, but that one was almost an hour long. So I decided to cut it and turn this into two videos. The reason I say not all double lung hits are the same is based on my experience with hitting deer with arrows in different parts of that thoracic cavity and the end result. Couple that with my knowledge of the anatomy of the lung and how the diaphragm works. So don't worry, I'm not going to throw up a bunch of PowerPoint slides again, but I want to take a minute to describe the shape of the diaphragm and how we breathe. So, and how deer breathe. Again, we're both mammals. We're both roughly the same size. Just piggybacking off of the premise behind that last video. So our diaphragm is a bowl-shaped muscle, and it sits on the bottom of our thoracic cavity, just like this. And when we exhale, what we want to do is we breathe by using a gas law called Boyle's law. And what we do is Boyle's law states, I'll go ahead and talk about Boyle's law. So Boyle's law states that the pressure of a gas in a closed container is inversely proportional to its volume of that closed container. So basically what that means is if you have a closed container and you increase the volume of that container, the pressure is inversely proportional. If the volume goes up, the pressure goes down. And conversely, if we decrease the volume, the gas pressure will go up. So this is how we breathe. This is how all mammals breathe. We kind of do a delicate dance with the atmosphere. So that diaphragm is sitting like this. When it's relaxed, it's in this bowl shape. And when we breathe, it drops. And when it drops, it increases the volume of our chest cavity, which decreases the pressure of the gas inside our chest cavity and the lungs. And then the atmosphere, once, gas is going to exist, that pressure is going to be at an equilibrium, then the weight of the atmosphere pushes air into our chest cavity to equalize the pressure, and then everything's good. And then when we go to exhale, we relax. The diaphragm then goes back up to its taller bowl shape, which decreases volume, increases pressure just above atmospheric pressure, and air rushes out. And that's a quick example of how we breathe. So because of that bowl shape, the lungs, as they fit around the diaphragm, what would be on a deer, the back edges of the lungs taper into a point. So if the diaphragm sits like this, the lungs are going to be tapering down to that point. So they're going to get thinner. Couple that with the fact that the back edge of the lungs are further away from the main arterial tree and the main bronchial tree, by the time you get down to the very bottom parts or back parts of their lung, the blood vessels and the bronchial tubes, they're all going to be the smallest ones there are, because just like the branches of a tree, the further you get away from the trunk, the smaller they get. So, because if you are real close or just on that diaphragm, then the broadhead is going through lung tissue that is thinner. That middle part of the lung you're not going to hit, because or you won't hit as much, because you're just hitting those tapered edges, and you're just not cutting as much lung tissue. And the lung tissue that you are cutting has smaller bronchial tubes and smaller blood vessels. And so I believe that, based on what I have seen, the closer you are to being in the middle of the lung, or just a little bit forward of that, that shot is more lethal than a very back lung hit. Okay, so that's the basic premise, and let's move on from there. Okay, this is the part that I wanted to have on the end of my previous video on the double lung. What I have are, I believe it's 7 bow kills. I have 7 does on camera that I've shot over the last few years. Now I want to talk a little bit about, you're going to see that they're all at feeders or ones at a bait pile, corn pile. That is not, I can already hear the keyboard warriors cracking their knuckles, getting ready to cast aspersions of how I hunt. But that is not the way that I don't hunt that way all the time. I'm going to admit that I am not a good bow hunting cameraman. I struggle with being able to drive the bow and get a shot on an animal and work a camera at the same time. So I have found that when you are relatively certain you know where the deer are going to be, say under a feeder or at a corn pile, it is much easier to get that kind of footage. So that's why a lot of my footage is of them at food. But that being said, that's beside the point. I mean, who cares? What we're looking at right now are the arrow impacts. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to show these shots, and then I'll tell you what broadhead was used, and then I'll want you to just make a mental note. Comment if you want. Not worried about that, but just make a mental note on what you think the end result was after these shots. So I'll show a couple of them. I actually have multiple camera angles. What I used to do is I would take one of my trail cameras and I carried it on a little tripod. And when I was fairly certain I knew where the shot was going to be, I would position that camera on that tripod down on the ground and set it on video, and would let it record 1-minute videos. And hopefully, most times it worked. As they came in front of the camera, they triggered it, it turned on, it recorded for a minute, and then I had a 1-second delay. So then it would stop for 1 second, and of course, if the deer was still standing there, it would kick back on. And so that's how I got those second angles. So let's go ahead and go with deer number 1. So this one, deer number 1, it's a doe. I'll put a marker so you know which one to look at. And before we watch it, I shot her with a Ramcat HydroShock. The Ramcat has an 1 3/8 cutting diameter. I killed a lot of animals with this broadhead. Had a standard insert on a regular. This was about a It's about a 420 grain arrow. And this is, and I didn't have a whole lot of weight up front, but I do have this one on multiple angles. So let's go ahead and take a look. So the tens and tens of you that are subscribers to the channel, you might have seen this one. This is a video that I put up a couple years ago when I got her. So you might already know the story. But by the way, I love that. I love that reverse camera angle. That was a trail camera set on the tripod, and that arrow looked like it almost hit the camera. That was a pretty cool angle. But if you've seen the video, you know what happened. She took off and she hit her head pretty hard on that tripod leg, and she took off and she ran past my house. I looked for her that evening. It got dark. I gave up and I went back out the next day, and I found her in the creek. She was just over a quarter mile away. I don't know. I didn't go over there that night. I don't really think I bumped her. I think that was just as far as she made it. And then she didn't feel good and she laid down in the creek, as they have a tendency to do. And she laid down there and died. And when I cut her open, there was no damage to the diaphragm. There was no damage to the liver. And I went through the back part of the lungs, very close to the diaphragm. I thought for sure that when I looked at those lungs that there would be at least a cut, a laceration through the diaphragm, but there wasn't. So I was in what would be the very posterior tips of those lungs. And she went a lot farther than I like for them to go. Okay, deer number 2. This was out at the field edge at a corn pile, as we're getting ready to see. Also a ramcat, hydra shock. And let's go see what happened. All right, what do you think? That one hit higher than what I wanted. My left and right, I think, for the angle where she was standing, my left and right was good, but I just hit a little higher than what I was hoping for. I was about 20, 22 feet up maybe, and she was out there right at about 18, 19 yards. So it was a steep-ish angle, but yeah, I was not really wanting to hit her that high. All right, so what do you think? How far do you think she went? What do you think happened? Let's go take a look at the end of this video. So there you go. She never left that field. She was at about 20 yards. All totaled, she ran about 50 or 60 yards. I think at that point, that field is about 75 or 80 yards across, and she didn't make it out of the field. I watched her fall. And again, I'm not a good cameraman. I shot and I forgot to pivot the camera to show her fall. So that's why it just cuts to her laying there in the field. So that one came in just under. I mean, I just missed her shoulder blade. Came in just under her scapula, went through both lungs. It came out about a textbook 10 ring right behind her front leg, right at the middle of the body, went right over top of the heart. I believe not only did I get the double lung, obviously I got the double lung because it went right through her, but I believe I severed the aorta as it makes its turn and starts to go under the spine, that aortic arch or arch of the aorta. I believe I put a hole in that, and that's why she didn't go very far. So this doe, we're back at the feeder, and I'm in my shooting house. I call it the killing crib. It's a very comfortable construction of barnwood and sheet metal that I have as my roof. Keeps me out of the rain and knocks down a lot of the wind. It is very convenient. It's right here behind the house. It's just a great place to go help fill my freezer. But this doe was shot with this broadhead. It is the Ramcat Diamondback. It's their fixed bladed head, 100 grain. I think it's 1 inch and 1/16, maybe 1/16. It's not quite as big of a cutting diameter broadhead. Again, standard insert on about a 420 grain arrow, I think. Nothing too fancy. So let's go ahead and take a look at the shot. All right, that's that classic chisel point replaceable broadhead thump. You really hear that deep pillow hit. I've got that one on 2 angles. The one angle you can see she ran out of sight. She made it to the field, and when she got to the field, she ran maybe another about 100 yards. So I think all totaled, she went about 150 yards. A little further than I like for them to go, but still very recoverable. She went down pretty quick. That arrow went double lung, came in. As you can see, she was walking away. She was a slight quartering. I came in just a little back, and I went right behind the heart, and it came out textbook 10 on the backside. So I missed the heart, and it was a double lung. But coming in at the back, the front side lung, I'm hitting what I have said is not the most valuable section of lung tissue, but luckily went right through the best part of the backside lung, and she went about 150 yards. Okay, this deer, I am at our family farm, and again, I'm in a blind. I'm down on the ground this time, and so I'm no downward trajectory on these. This time, I'm using a different broadhead from Ramcat. It's an expandable. It's called the Savage. I think it's an inch and a half cutting diameter, 100 grain, standard weight insert. Again, nothing too new, nothing too crazy, pretty typical. And well, let's take a look. Let's look at the shot, and you tell me what you think. Okay, did you see it in slow-mo? Did you see what happened? Let's look at slow-mo one more time. So we watch. When this happened, I thought, that's a dead deer. And if you look, when that arrow passes through, you can see it kick out on the opposite side, and it comes out at an awkward angle and hits way further left than what you would think at the trajectory that the arrow was headed in. And I believe, and I didn't know this until I got home and reviewed the footage, but after I saw it in slow-mo, I knew why when I found the arrow, it was covered in gut material, based on what I found and what the video indicated. This broadhead hit that back rib and deflected. Now, we can argue over, did it deflect because I only had 100 grains up front, 100 grain and a 12 grain insert? We can argue, was it because it was an expandable, or was it just one of those 1 in a million? I happened to hit that rib in the exact one spot that caused that broadhead to kick. Would a heavier FOC helped? I don't know. Would a fixed bladed head help? I don't know. But I can tell you that in that situation, this broadhead hitting that spot at that angle did not do what I was hoping. And as I've said before, once that arrow leaves, man, it's fire and forget. It is out of your control. So sometimes that stuff happens. And that deer was never found. I looked the rest of that day. That was a morning hunt. I looked for hours. I scoured our property. I followed blood for about 40 yards, and then it just petered out. It was just, here's a drop. And then 10 yards later, I'd find another drop. And I was hoping to find her in the creek, but I went up and down the creek. I went up on top. I looked all over, and I, to this day, have no idea where that deer ended up. This one, this is, I believe, deer number 5. We are back out at the family property. I'm in the same ground blind at the same feeder. It was the same hunting season. And again, here I am just looking to put meat in the freezer. This doe was shot with, I'm back to the Ramcat Diamondback, again, 100 grains with a standard insert. And she's standing there, she's slightly quartering away, and here's the shot. Okay, that was that classic, man. She goes down and she starts plowing, and then she regains and takes off. What do you think? How far did she make it? I'm happy to report that broadhead came in as I hoped because of the quartering away. I was a little back from where I would shoot on a broadside animal. You're quartering away, you want to come in a little bit back. That one went in just a little bit back and went right through the heart and came out just in front of her backside shoulder. She went about 70, maybe 75 yards, and I recovered her without any complications. Okay. This deer, I love in the snow. This doe, I'm back here at the homestead here at Grips Archery. And this one I shot with a Helix broadhead, 125 grain, single bevel. The Helix, I think, is 1 inch and 1/8 cutting diameter, somewhere around there. Don't quote me. It's not an overly aggressive, really big broadhead. But, and one of the things I forgot to mention was I was starting to experiment with a little heavier arrow setup, and I did not go with, on that deer, I did not go with a heavy insert, but I did go with a weight tube that slides into this weight tube, I believe, was an extra 5 grains per inch, and so that put that arrow a lot closer to the 500 grain mark. Let's go ahead and cut right to the shot. Did you hear it? Let's go back and play it one more time. If you notice right at the end of where the video cuts off, you hear her crash. She made it. I think it was under 10 seconds from arrow impact until I heard her go down, and she was about 50, maybe 60 yards total from the feeder, and she never made it to the field. So that one's one of my favorites. When I heard her go down, I thought, oh, well, that's what we're after. This broadhead came in, went right through the heart. Similar to the last deer, she's just got a slight quarter. I hit her pretty much dead on where I would have shot her at broadside. The arrow again came out right in front of her front leg, and she was done in under 10 seconds. Okay, this is the last one. And for those of you who are, again, subscribers and fans to the channel, first of all, thank you. Second of all, you might have seen this one from last season. Now I'm starting to experiment a little bit more with heavier broadheads and heavier inserts. This doe was shot with a dirt nap DRT single bevel. This is the 150 to 175. It comes with a collar. I used it in the 150 grain configuration, but I had a 100 grain insert behind that arrow. Is about a 570 grain arrow. And if you watch the video, I might throw a card in there. You know what happened after that arrow passed through that deer. That's not my main concern. What we're talking about today is how far did she go? All right, so let's watch the shot and see what happens. All right, so there was the shot. How far do you think? Well, let's go to the end of the video. Okay, there you go. She ran across the creek, got up on that next little semi ridge, stopped for a minute, and by the time I turned and got the camera on her, she was already starting to lose consciousness, and just out of sheer confusion, she ran back to me and ended up dying there in that little drainage ditch, about 40 yards away. So I guess you could say grand total, she probably ran about 100 yards, but she ran and stopped and then came back. And so what I have found in my 33 years of bow hunting, and I think I'm somewhere between 80 and 85 whitetails harvested in my life. What I have found out is when that arrow, the quicker and easier that you can get an arrow go through that animal, that seems to be when they have a greater tendency to run and get far enough away to escape immediate danger and then stop and try to get a handle on the moment. When that arrow stays in them, I think their body absorbs all of that kinetic energy and they feel that more, and that has a tendency to make them run a little further. So my goal, and this is me, I'm not saying this is the best way and the right way to do it. As I said in my last video, do what works for you. This is where I am. This is how I want this to go down. When I shoot an animal, I want that arrow to expend as little energy as possible going all the way through that animal. I want the best penetrating broadhead I can get. I want to get all the way through that animal, and I want that arrow to just absolutely zip through that animal before they ever realize what's going on. And I have found that that's when they run off, and they stop and they look back, and they pass out. No blood to their brain, and they just stand there and fall over, and then they expire. That's what I want. I really don't. I'm not interested in blood trailing. I want to watch them fall and go get them. That's my goal. So for me, I want that arrow. I want a good cut on contact broadhead. And I want to get, because no one will argue that they're not the best penetrating broadhead out there. Do they cut the biggest hole? No. But studies have shown they're the best penetrating broadhead that's out there, that's best designed. You don't have to poke a chisel point through the hide. You don't have to expend energy having blades open. They just cut all the way through. And that's my goal. Cut them all the way through, put them down as fast as I can, and walk over and pick them up. So if you watched my buck from this year, I'll put a card. I won't bother putting that video clip back in, but it was another deer at the feeder. It was late season. I was hoping to shoot a doe, but this buck stood there and did everything I wanted him to do, and basically was begging me to shoot him. So I did what he wanted. But it's a good, handsome 8-pointer. I was happy to take him, and more importantly, happy to put the meat in the freezer. That one was just over the heart, through the thickest part of the lungs, and that was with a Magnus Black Hornet stair razor, the 125 grain with the 4-blade. It went right through him, and you can watch him in the video. He ran off maybe 30 yards, and he stopped me, stood there. And when he started to lose consciousness, he staggered and came back my way, and he ended up dropping about 20, 25 yards from where he was when I shot him. And that's what I'm after. Zip it through, take out as much of the cardiovascular system as I can, and watch them fall over. All right. So, in summation, some of the things that I want to talk about. Number one, I am not going to get into the best broadhead arrow combination. I mean, clearly, I've shot a lot of deer with a lot of different kinds of broadheads. Again, as I said in that double lung video, you shoot what works for you. I'm not going to be an anti-expandable mechanical broadhead guy. I'm just not. When they work, when everything goes right, they kill deer. The last one I used, you can see that this video, the deer that I lost, that was the last time I used an expandable head. And I've lost other deer on an expandable head. I've lost deer with a fixed bladed head. You know, it happens. But for me, I think I have come up with right now the arrow setup that I want for my philosophy on how to best dispatch that animal. But don't get me wrong, I get the allure of the expandable head. You cut a big hole. They're easy to tune. You know, you don't really have to spend a whole lot of time with the whole tuning part of the broadhead to the arrow and all that stuff. I get it. You know, we're busy. You got work. You want to be able to thread those broadheads in, and you're ready to go. Take one practice shot. They hit with your field points. I'm headed to the woods. I get it. I totally understand. I have done it. You know, I'm not going to look at somebody and roll my eyes. Oh, you're an expandable guy. I don't care. You hunt with what you want to hunt with. But here's what we have to consider. So going back to the whole double lung is not equal. You know, if you are not going to shoot for that heart and heart area, if you're, because of the shoulder, then you're going to stay back, because you know that your expandables aren't made to go through that heavy bone, and you're going to stay back, then yeah, use that big expandable. But let's keep in mind the one variable that you can't control is where that animal is in its breathing cycle. So the boundary of the bottom or the back of that thoracic cavity is moving. That diaphragm moves. If that animal is exhaling, your margin of error has just gotten smaller because that diaphragm comes up. And so now the distance from the back of the heart to the diaphragm is a lot shorter. When he's taking a breath, now your margin of error is bigger. If this animal is calm and relaxed, the diaphragm isn't moving as much. But if it's a rutted buck that's been chasing a doe and it's standing there, mouth open, panting, that diaphragm is moving a lot. It's moving probably 4 inches worth of, or 4 ribs worth of movement. It's going up and back. So your boundary on the back edge is moving. On that flip side, if you're shooting for the heart, then you need to consider that you need an arrow that will better handle that heavier bone. That's all I have to say about it. Whatever you decide to do, great, go for it. I wish you the best luck. But if you're going to shoot more forward, look at a broadhead and an arrow setup that's going to help you if you hit that heavy bone. If you're not shooting that far forward, then by all means, go with that big broadhead, go with that lighter, faster arrow, whatever works best for you. All right. I think that's enough for this video, guys. Hopefully you learned something. My goal is to help people learn from my mistakes and my successes. And I hope that you take something from this and it will help you become a more lethal bow hunter. That is my goal. Hey guys, as always, thanks for watching, and I'll talk to you guys later.